Deforestation is the clearing or thinning of forests by humans, which represents one of the largest issues in global land use. Deforestation traditionally is based on the area of forest cleared for human use, which including the removal of the trees for wood products, croplands, and grazing land. The loss of forest may be driven by human-induced and natural cause, but most of the time, human-driven is always be the cause of the deforestation. For example, with the continuous of the clear cutting, all the trees are removed from the land, which this completely destroys the forest. And in some cases, partial logging and accidental fires can also thin out the trees, which enough to change the forest structure. According to the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, deforestation is the conversion of forest to another land use or the long-term reduction of the tree canopy cover below the minimum 10% hold. Deforestation go together with the human development to fulfill the demanding of shelter, food, fuel, and medicine. Cutting down the trees may not require advanced technology because we can see that the earliest people could use just stone or access to fell trees or fire to clear large expanses. As civilization advanced, the forests were cleared for agricultural purposes and then for increased the urbanization. The growth of population in the European forests from 9000 to 5000 BC led to extensive land clearing for agriculture, animal domestication, and using fire for hunting game. Since the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, forests have been exploited worldwide. According to Michael Williams in his 2001 article in History Today, 16 million acres of forest were cleared between the end of the 17th century to the start of the 20th century. For example, in Malaysia's forests cover many types of forests like mangrove, beech forest, tropical lowland rainforest, freshwater swamp, and hill forest. The forests of peninsular Malaysia, Sabah, and Sarawak have been inhabited, managed, and used for centuries. In pre-colonial times, what we have known now as Orang Asli who living in the forests of the Malay Peninsula and Malaysia had already collecting forest produce like rattan, gums, saps, resins, and sandstone wood for their own use plus for trading locally and traditionally. The indigenous communities had traded these products in exchange for ceramics, textiles, and others from China and other things from other countries. So, the exploitation of forest resources for domestic use and trading were an important activity for the indigenous people of Malaya, and this had caused minor impacts on forests in that time. After British came to the Malaya, plantation agriculture was an experiment with various types of cash crop as there are factors that prevent it to success and make good product, such as price fluctuation, soil and nutrient exhaustion, ignorance of the local environment, pests and disease, competition from other colonies, and changing government policy. For instance, around 1875, coffee was introduced and grown in small scale on hilly land and on coastal plains later in Malaya. Then, in 1890s, car industry development created a rubber boom that led to deforestation of Malayan forests for rubber planting. In 1916, commercial rubber planted was about 400,000 hectares and doubled in 1921. After that, the forest had been cleared nearly 1 million hectares of land and planted it with rubber trees by 1925. Before 1950s, logging industry in Malaya and Sarawak was small and only for local demand, where the timber trees were cut by axe and pulled by animals like buffaloes and elephants. The timber was needed for construction of railway sleepers or as firewoods in tin mining in Malaya and as product for export trade in Sabah and Sarawak. By late 1940s, commercial logging was beginning in large scale for the timber export in Sarawak, where the rubber export had been replaced by the timber as Sarawak's main export. In 1950s, the timber industry was focused to the remin exploitation, where remin is a hardwood tree of Malaysian swamp forest which yields pale lightweight timber. The timber industry started to develop rapidly, and the timber export was a major source of income for Malaysia in the 1960s and 1970s. During these periods, remin had been overexploited, and it was responsible for the loss of forests in peninsular Malaysia. Then, when modern technologies started to be used such as chainsaws, crawler tractors, and winch lorries, the situation of logging has changed, where these technologies had functioned in the use of heavy machineries to build roads, to access the felling sites which are an area in a major forest that is to be cut, to transport the cut logs of wood, to fell trees and to extract logs. Although these technologies help the agriculture and the industry works to be much easier, however, the logging activities also give impact on damaging and destroying the vegetation, the forest undergrowth, the river, the groundwater and the soil, which reduce its fertility.
I'm pretty sure we all know that the Amazon rainforest is the largest rainforest in the world, which is the home of more than 40,000 plant species, 3,000 fish species, 1,300 birds, 430 mammals, 1,000 of amphibians, with an average of 216 new species discovered every 2 days. Unfortunately, deforestation in the Amazon has been rising by 17%. An approximate of 11,088 kilometers squared of the forests are destroyed in just 2020. According to INPE, since 1970, over 700,000 kilometers squared of the Amazon rainforest has been destroyed. President of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, is at blame when in 2019, after being elected as president, he declared that the Amazon is owned by Brazil and he supports all deforestation activities. To add on that, he also believed that deforestation and fires in the Amazon occurs naturally. Isn't it sad that the most crucial rainforest, which act as a carbon sink, is being extensively annihilated day by day? Meanwhile, it is reported by Global Forest Watch organization that from 2002 to 2020, Malaysia has lost up to 34% of its total tree cover, which caused a decrease of 17% of the total area of humid primary forest. The top two regions in Malaysia that is responsible for the tree loss is Sarawak in the east part and Pahang for the west part. In the early of 2020, the Chief Minister of Selangor, Amiruddin Shari, defended the state's government intentions to degazette the majority of Kuala Langat North Forest Reserve. Sadly, the petition to save KL and FR received a lukewarm response. Although there are many environmental non-profit organizations fighting for our forests, the amount of trees which has been deforested is not yet decreasing significantly. Why is this happening? Is it because people still lack of awareness, or are we just too ignorant to care just a little bit of our forests?
With the world expanding at an unbelievable rate, the rising demand for space is becoming a matter of concern. A direct action known as deforestation occurs in a response to a desperate need for land for agricultural, industrial, and most importantly, urban requirement to contain cities and their increasing population. Here are some of the causes of the deforestation. First and foremost, both legal and illegal industrial logging are destroying forest resources. Paper, matchsticks, and furniture are all wood-based industries that need a large amount of wood supply. As a result, trees are being cut down to meet the need for supplies. Illegal wood cutting and logging trees are profitable for some of this business. Moreover, as logging happens, indirect effects such as the construction of forest road for access to the camp and temporary accommodation for logging workers can cause damage to the forest floor, soil and vegetation by these logging trucks and heavy machinery. Next is natural forest clearance or conversion of forest land to other land use, usually with logging as a precursor. Plantation, agribusiness and extractive industries such as mining are examples of these other activities. Oil and coal mining consume a lot of forest land. Mining waste pollute the soil and has a negative impact on nearby species. Moreover, mining is expanding all over the world thanks to an ever-increasing demand for minerals in everything from carpets to medicine and smartphone. Large-scale mining also expensive and bring destruction to the forest. So next time you are thinking of upgrading your smartphone, Consider that over half of its components are made from mined and semi-processed materials. We will move on to the next topic. How does deforestation affect the environment? Deforestation has many impacts to ecosystem and may pose a serious threat to the planet resilience. Let's take a look at the main effect of deforestation to a better understanding why it is so bad for the planet. First of all, the decline in life quality of people. Statistics shows 1 billion of people globally depend on forests for survival and use them to hunt and collect raw material for their small-scale agricultural activities. But in developing countries such as Indonesia and Vietnam, their land tenure system are weak. This allows big business to get this land and use them for other purpose and disrupting local people's life. Local then have to make one of two choices. They can choose to leave their land and relocate somewhere, avoiding conflict and accepting the challenge of a new life. Or they can stay and work for the companies exploring it in a remote plantation. However, they are getting unfair wages and working under inhuman conditions. Next effect of deforestation is flood. When it rains, trees absorb and store a large amount of water with the help of their root. When they are cut down, the flow of water is disrupted and the soil loses its ability to retain water. It leads to floods in some areas and drought in others. Undisturbed forests, coral reefs, and mangrove act as a buffer zone against force of nature such as gales, tidal wave, and sudden downpour of rain. Where these natural buffers are destroyed or disturbed, the vulnerability of the areas and inhabitants to disasters such as flash flood, mudslides, and other climatic catastrophes is increased.
In Malaysia, there are three separate bodies which determine Malaysia's forest policy. 1. Peninsular Malaysia Forestry Department in Kuala Lumpur. 2. The Forestry Department Sabah. And 3. The Forestry Department Sarawak. Under Malaysia's constitution, 13 state governments have complete jurisdiction over their forest resources. So, each state is empowered to enact laws on forestry and to formulate forestry policy independently. The federal government only provides technical advice and assistance on forest management, training, the conduct of research, and in the maintenance of experimental and demonstration stations. Unity on forestry matters is achieved through the National Forestry Act of 1984 and the National Forest Policy of 1978, which the states are encouraged to adopt through state enactments. Individual states are free to amend their state forestry enactments as they see fit. The National Forestry Act has been adopted by the individual states in Peninsular Malaysia, but not wholly by Sabah and Sarawak. In Sarawak, the key legislation is the Forest Ordinance 1964, which was repealed and replaced by Sarawak Forest Ordinance in 2015. In Sabah, the Forest Enactment 1968 and Forest Rules 1969 were in force until 2015 when the Forest Enactment was adopted. They nevertheless share many similarities. They all include provision for the creation of permanent forests for productive and production purposes. The policies also state that forest resources can be harvested for export purposes. The importance of long-term planning and security of tenure is also emphasized in the three forest policies. They also provide for the promotion of turf and economical utilization of forest produce on land not included in the forest estate prior to the alienation of such land. On the 29th of January 2021, the Malaysian Forestry Policy had been agreed upon by all state governments at the 78th National Land Council meeting, which outlines a clear direction for the forestry sector in facing new challenges at domestic and international levels. The policy had also gone through a process of negotiations between the Peninsula, Sabah and Sarawak since 2016. The Malaysian Forestry Policy will serve as a reference and guide to forestry policies.
To end our video, we would like to conclude that nature and environment is a creation with all its harmoniously interacting components for humankind. That we should not overpower, dominate, and controlling nature in order that it may be manipulated for human welfare. There can be no such thing as human beings making improvements on the workings of nature by unlocking its laws and manipulating them to serve the betterment of human civilization by furthering its development and mining of resources. Large-scale deforestation is also not just an option for development, as they can follow low-carbon city framework where they can use greenfield and brownfield instead of focusing on greenfield. Government concern in planting trees also cannot be one only solution. How much plant is needed to sustain our environment? We suggest that they should focus more on preserving natural beauty. And lastly, to our audience, we should put more concern to this matter by sharing with our friends and family and thus adding more voice to support our nature.